Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. Look at this, JP. It's a Thursday.
Guess who's back?
Guess who's back? Colin Watt. There you go. Resplendent in his Bumblebee jersey. I'm taking it that's one of the retro remakes, Colin.
It is, yeah. It's the, what's it, the 99? The 96? 96. Aye, that would be like George Cadetti, guys like that, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Aye. Who do you think of, JP, when you see that?
Di Canio or Cadetti, I'd say.
You do. There's no getting away from it. That's the players that spring to my mind. And a little worn away jersey behind you, JP, and it's still classy. It's aged like a fine wine.
Yeah, I was wearing it on Tuesday night for good luck. I always wear an away top when we're playing away and a home top if we're at home. It's a ridiculous superstition, but it's the last top that my dad ever got me.
Oh.
So it's quite special to me, and thankfully still in good nick.
I've got to say, that's one of the best ones we've done in a long, long time. It was really smart. I remember. Now, is this the one that changed the shorts? Because I think we had black shorts at one point with it, and then they changed it. And
it was blackout shorts. They didn't have a Celtic badge on them. They just had the Tenants logo on the left.
Yeah, it was cracking. It was really, really smart. I remember because you talk about who this reminds you of. That reminds me of Samaras, Ledley,
Samaras, absolutely.
Commons, guys like that. I mean, and the night, although it wasn't the kit we wore, it always reminds me of that night against Barcelona because it was that season.
Yeah.
And it was just such a special day. That
all three kits that season were brilliant. It was for the 125th anniversary. You had that home kit that we wore against Barca, that white one, and then the black one with the green, white, and orange on the sleeves. Yes, beautiful. By the way, we've got loads to catch up on. We'll come back to that Doves album above you, JP, if we are allowed to indulge one another in a little bit of music chat later on. But I've got to say, this Friday, this is Acsom. I am joined by the lead singer of a band called the Tijuana Bibles, who you introduced me to, JP, and their album has adorned your shelf on an episode of Acsom in the past. So we were talking about you, mate. Hopefully your ears weren't burning. It was all good. But it was brilliant actually catching up with them after all this time. And that episode goes out tomorrow night, JP. So
Tony's a good guy. They're all good guys, but Tony's a good guy. I take it that's who you were speaking to, obviously.
It was, yeah, and we talk about everything from Estonian gangsters to getting the Celtic chants over in Basque Country, I believe it was, that they were at a festival. So brilliant.
Their drummer Mikey was in Munich, by the way.
Is that right? That's why he couldn't join us. Aye, you're right. Let's talk about Munich, gentlemen, right? Because it was tremendous on the night. It was tremendous after it, and we've been talking about it. But what I like to talk about is kind of like the impact of it, JP. And I'm looking right back to when Brendan Rodgers came back to this football club and divided opinion. I'm Colin, you've not been on to actually talk about that. What was your view when Brendan came back to the club?
Do you know what? It was the most qualified man for the job at that point. And I know obviously there was a lot of people that had some bad feelings towards him. I could completely understand that. And I'll indulge with you another story another time about what happened the day before his departure because it's funny, but I can't share it for on here because it will get somebody into trouble.
Legal reasons.
Yeah. And it will mean I'll need to sleep on the couch, put it that way. But for me, I always thought it was the best candidate out there, and I always think when it comes round to the managerial appointment, we should always be going for the best candidate that's available. Rodgers obviously has learned a lot since he was at Celtic last time. His spell at Leicester had successes, had its failures, but you always had a wee feeling that even after he left Celtic, there was always going to be a point where he came back. He kept going on about Celtic. Every time he was mentioning in an interview with BT or with Sky, it was always my time at Celtic. And he kept going on about Celtic. And a lot of people will be sort of 50-50 on whether he is genuinely a Celtic supporter. But I do think he's got connections with Celtic. And when he came back, it was a case of, right, you've done what you've done. Now come and prove to us that you're not just back here because it's the only option. Come and prove to us that you want to be here. And I think over the last 18 months he's done that, and the maturity that he's shown has really brought this club on. I think Ange took us to a level, and Brendan at the minute's taking us to the next stage. And that's all you can ask for as a fan of a football club, is that you continue to develop.
You know this, Colin, I agree with that, right? I think in his career trajectory, JP, there's been a few moments where I would never call Celtic a backward step, but it was probably not going to happen if he won the Premiership at Liverpool, right? If Stevie Gerrard didn't fall, we wouldn't have had Brendan Rodgers as our manager. These are just the things. I remember Mark McGee getting interviewed once and saying that there was a particular game that had he won the game, he would have ended up managing Liverpool. And I'm not quite sure that would have happened with Mark McGee, but certainly Rodgers, his star was shining, his trajectory was steep. And then when it came to Celtic, I was blown away with that. I just thought the best manager we could possibly get first time round. When he leaves, I think he's then taken that backward step. Personally, I think he's taken a backward step to try and move forward again. But he's came to Celtic, and a big part of that, I believe, I've got no proof of this. I'm just listening to his press conferences, his interviews, was to repair and rewrite that legacy, JP, because he did tarnish it the way he left first time round. And how can he repair his legacy? Well, win doubles, win trebles, and progress in Europe, basically.
Well, he said one of the takeaways from his first press conference was, "I'm here to win." Mm-hmm. And I think it was Tam Selleck's son had shared the clip of Adrian Balboa with Rocky when he's in bed, and she's like, "Just do one thing for me." He's like, "What's that?" Win. I remember seeing that and hairs up in the back of my neck, and I was
Who is Tam Selleck? Who is that guy? I mean, honestly,
an absolute legend of the highest.
He absolutely is. You know what I mean? He wins Twitter on a regular basis. And
it's actually one of the main reasons that I've not deleted it. Genuinely, because it's one of the things I look forward to, especially in the wake of seismic results in Scottish Cups and stuff like that. That he's the type of guy you want to go to and watch. But Brendan Rodgers coming back, that was like I said, he was one of the first things he said was he was here to win. And he I don't know if you saw that little 20-minute video with him and Martin O'Neill for Prime in the build up to. They were just sitting in his office, I guess, and he alluded to something that I mentioned I'd heard about when he gave a private audience to fans at Celtic Park, which was a no phones, no cameras event, and he basically emotionally said, "I saw myself being edited out of Celtic's history, and I wasn't comfortable with that." And that was always my main gripe with him leaving, was that you've been so great for us, but you've kind of tarnished your legacy by leaving. Mm-hmm. You did, and it was more that I was more angry about that than the fact that he'd actually left. It was more about the fact that he kind of spoiled that kind of almost like the end of Return of the Jedi, where you see Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan and all that together. It's like that was kind of like seeing Neil Lennon, Martin O'Neill, and Brendan Rodgers on the pitch with Seedorf talking after the game. You're like three hugely important Irishmen who have been part of Celtic throughout my entire life, and who have played such a significant part in amazing, happy memories. Obviously, there's despair along the way there as well. You only need to think of a particular Sunday in the mid-2000s to remind yourself of the despair that's associated with Martin O'Neill. But then you've got the high of the run to Seville and the final itself. Neil Lennon, you've got the high of beating Barcelona, winning leagues, winning trebles, topping our Europa League group, numerous man of the match performances where he didn't get man of the match as a player, when Larsson or Sutton or Hartson or whoever else got the plaudits, but Neil Lennon was invariably a stick-on man of the match. And then Brendan Rodgers and what he's done in two spells at Celtic, just utter domination.
Yeah.
Complete domination. And it was quite something to just sit there the other night, almost trying to take in what you just experienced, and Celtic taking a Bayern Munich team to the last few seconds of a game in that arena, and knowing exactly how those fans must have felt as the home fans in that stadium, knowing that they were very, very much on edge. Every time it cut to them in the crowd, and the manager, Company, he looked not happy either about the situation. But to see those three guys together was I think quite iconic, and will be remembered by everybody that was unfortunate not to be at the game. I mean, as we were closing in on that victory, I was thinking about the people that were there, and I was thinking about how I wasn't there, and I was just like, oh God, man, imagine if we win this. That's really. I was already foreseeing drunken conversations with friends who were there, but at the same time, all I was thinking was, God, how good would that be for the people there? You quickly moved away from the self and thought about the people that were there and thought, I know exactly how amazing that will be if that happens. Unfortunately, it wasn't to be, but what a night.
It's quite funny. Sorry, Paul, I was going to say it's quite funny. You're talking about JP, obviously the three living legends there, basically, and the three Irishmen. But it's like three Irishmen and everybody's favourite pub quiz answer in Clarence Seedorf. So, but as you say, going back to the idea of Brendan coming back and what that game showed on Tuesday night, Paul, there was someone that was very interesting in the crowd for me, and that was Dermot Desmond. The fact that Dermot Desmond was there, and he
know that.
He was there, and he was watching that. And I think, obviously, Brendan was always Dermot's choice. We know that from the first time round. Pushed for it very hard, and then he pushed for his return as well. We're now seeing that Brendan came back this time because he believes he can take this club to the next stage. Not the next level, let's be honest. We're never going to get up there and be matching every single week a Real Madrid, a Barcelona, a Bayern Munich. But we can show that we deserve to be in that area. We deserve to be in that tournament. We deserve to be competing in that tournament. And the money that Brendan's been given over the last few windows, January the exception, obviously. I say we still got Jota then, but the likes of Engels, the likes of spending the money on Ida, I think that was one of the reasons why Brendan did leave. We all knew he was going to leave that season. We didn't expect him to leave in the February, but we expected him to leave in the summer. And the reason being that he just didn't get that investment. We had that money coming in then. We have the money even more coming in now. Now we can look at it and say, well, Engels, £11 million, great signing. Ida, he's got his hot and cold moments, but overall, good signing. Jota, 6 million, whatever it is, straight back into the team, fantastic. So we're looking at this and saying, right, we've got to this level, we've got to the knockout ties. This shouldn't just be a one-off. This should be our standard now. We have to raise our bar to this level. And with Dermot sitting watching that in the crowd, he can go, I want to be in Munich, I want to be in Barcelona, I want to be in Milan when Celtic are having these nights. And when it comes to the discussions around the transfer window in the summer, Brendan's got every right to go and say to him, you want those moments again? Continue to back me and I'll bring it to you. And he's done that.
No, you're right. The thing on that, what you said, the iconic moment is seeing those three managers on the park together, Colin, coupled by that interview that you mentioned, JP. And during that interview, incidentally, he spoke about kind of his part, looking back with hindsight, looking at his part in, leaving the football club first time round. And he said that his expectations weren't realistic. So he was a younger manager who was probably wanting that level of signing constantly. When we did it with Edward, and I thought to myself, right, we broke the bank here to bring in a 19-year-old player who had played first-team football for Toulouse on loan, PSG Academy. That was a complete change in approach. And that that was driven by Brendan. And I think that obviously he's now saying, well, he wanted to do that again and again and again to push the club on. Unfortunately for him, though, I don't think he had that campaign that he now does under his belt to say to the likes of Dermot Desmond, as Colin points out, this is what you get if you give me the dough. I will produce this. I will provide you with that. And it takes it from, and I do agree with you, Colin, it's taking it from participation to competing. We all know that the way that the world works in football right now and where we are in the food chain, we won't win the Champions League. But what you want to do is you want to get into the knockout stages. Now, listen, the playoff is a knockout stage as far as I'm concerned, right? It's a knockout stage to the last 16. And that's what we got this season. So I think that was the difference last time round. He's probably been demanding, I want this, because, by the way, you only have to go back to when we had Philip Benkovic on loan, and Rodgers was pushing to sign him on a permanent, and it would have cost us 10 million quid. They were talking about breaking the track. Imagine we signed him. He's played about 15 minutes since then.
Yeah.
But he was pushing for it. He didn't get it. This time round, it needs to work both ways. I've spent this money, but this is what you get, as you say, Colin. Some great points coming through, but going back to that interview, JP, right? Obviously, there was this big buzz around Prime covering the game, and it's the first time Celtic have appeared on Prime. if as fans, like last week, you were to say, right, okay, we're working on this package for Prime. What do you want? You'd probably say, well, I'll tell you something. I wouldn't mind seeing Martin O'Neill, Neil Lennon and Brendan Rodgers on the park after the game talking about it. And, leading into it, how about a wee sit-down interview between Neil Lennon and Martin O'Neill? And before that, do like a wee magazine excerpt talking to Henrik Larsson. It would have just basically been, what's your wish list? And they've ticked every single one of them. JP, I thought the coverage was brilliant.
Yeah, even an enthused Alan Shearer willing us on. Like,
I know.
It's like, what sort of bizarre alternate reality are we in? Not that Alan Shearer has ever intimated any dislike of Celtic, but if he knew the song we've been singing for the last 27 years,
starting to feel mad about that, JP.
No, I thought it was great. It is a bit weird when like a channel that just suddenly acquires the rights to the Champions League, and you're watching Champions League games on all sorts of different channels. I guess that's just the world we live in. I mean, remember the STV days of Champions League games when they covered our away games, which was a long time ago. But no, I thought they did put a bit of thought into it, and I read an article about that interview, and whoever wrote it, I forget who it was, but it kind of alluded to the fact that there was not a lot of love lost between Brendan Rodgers and Martin O'Neill.
I read that. Yeah.
Did you read that?
Aye.
What was it referring to, do you think?
You know what I think it was, JP? I think it was Martin O'Neill made comments about the way Brendan left Celtic, and they made them publicly. So there was this kind of thought process that there was a bit of needle, between them, and obviously there was no kind of signs of that the other night, was there? So,
no, and I think that thing that happened in London where they were all at that Celtic Foundation event, was it? The one that Tierney was at.
Yep.
Somebody told me, I can't remember who it was that told me, but it wasn't anybody directly involved with Celtic, but they heard that they'd all sort of stayed up for a few drinks, like at the bar, like together, and O'Neill was 3 sheets to the wind on red wine, which, as we've witnessed with our own eyes, he is partial to a glass of wine. So it's not to be disbelieved, but no, I was really kind of pleased to see them sitting and relaxed like that. Brendan Rodgers did drop a bit of a bombshell in some ways that some people have picked up on, where he discussed the length of his contract. I think he dropped in, when my contract's up here, or I said something along those lines, and I'm just more thinking, please God, let us hang on to him. Like I just wouldn't want this to be the end. It's one of those things where, like, wow, we finally got into the world that we want to be in. Because how many times have we sat here over the last few years and been like, we're a Europa League side,
I know,
playing in the Champions League, but we were a Champions League side playing in the Champions League the other night. There's no two ways about it. I don't care how many snaky Rangers fans come out from behind rocks to try and take shine off it. I'm sorry, but I wouldn't be getting anywhere near out of that rock in the wake of a defeat to Queen's Park. I'd be staying firmly underneath it until such time as I have something properly to shout about. And this whole decrying, won a knockout tie in 22 years. I know where I'd rather be right now. If you gave me a knockout tie, one versus the success and the stranglehold we have on the Scottish League titles, cups, everything, I would take that every day over winning a. What do you get for winning a knockout tie?
And the thing is, we're talking about progression, JP. What has been done in terms of progression? You can go on a run, you can reach finals, etc. But have you built on that? Because there's a lot of comments coming through, and I'll touch on them slightly. We don't really tend to focus too much on Rangers unless it impacts on Celtic. But in terms of what they then do after it, it's been built on sand because they didn't have the money to do it and progress in such a way that the money that then comes in through European progression can be reinvested. They've never done that because it was built in sand in the first place. They spent money they didn't have. I'm talking second time round, post 2012, whereas Celtic have done it in a gradual process. And I've always felt that we've been too cautious when it comes to trying to progress in Europe. I did not like the attitude of the previous chairman, Ian Bankier, when he was based, and he said it at a fans forum event, that we cannot compete in Europe. And that was the attitude. And then you start worrying at that point, if that's the culture within the boardroom, then we'll never progress. And they're happy just to tick off domestic titles, which, by the way, I never ever take for granted. But it needs to be with a view to progressing. in Europe. Of course it is. That's your pathway into European football. So I think there's been a mindset change, Colin. Now, I don't know if that runs throughout the entirety of the club. There's been a lot of changes behind the scenes to try and improve the football department. I don't think we've seen the benefit of them yet. I mean, Paul Tisdale only came in October. So maybe the January window was too early for him. 3 months to do something different. All we know that he has done is appointed David Pleat as an English-based scout. I mean, we don't really know what's going on with Paul Tisdale. This is the kind of thing, it would be phenomenal to hear a sit-down interview with him. Celtic TV have got all the facilities and budgets in the world. Sit down, let's talk about your role. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. Apologies, I'm getting very distracted here. We're having a bit of a massive thunderstorm here in Greenock.
Really?
Thunder and lightning. It's wild. The rain.
You two guys will be competing with sirens because normally a police car or an ambulance passes both your houses whilst
that's what happens when you stay towards the centre. And not on the sticks like some people, Paul. It's funny, like what we were saying about what would be your ideal pre-match preparation. That's another big flash of lightning there. The idea of what Prime put together, Celtic TV have all this. They can do all of this.
Aye, you're right.
And yet, the production levels at Celtic TV. Now I know you're not supposed to have Celtic TV if you're in the UK, but everybody's got access to Celtic TV. Let's be honest.
I've got Celtic TV, so like genuinely, so I can watch the games back before I come on the show.
But the standard that they put together is poor, really, really poor. And I don't know whether it's to do with the budget that they've got or what it is, but for being an in-house entertainment team, these interviews, Martin O'Neill, Henrik Larsson, we get them all over. They come over, they do all these events in the Hydro, they do them in the Kerrydale Suite, etc., right? And most recently, some of the documentaries have been very, very good and the standard's getting there. But in terms of the pre-match quality, it's poor. Fans are paying at times £15 for the pay-per-view, and you're seeing what you could get for a month's free trial on Prime on Tuesday night. It's something we can really work towards and improve, I think, if we want to kind of, as you're saying, it's standards across the whole team, the footballing division, the sort of entertainment division, the media division. We're all taking these steps up. And you're right in what you're saying. Tisdale, David Pleat, I know there's other scouts that we've got out there that have been actively mentioned before, including our South American scout who brings us people that like a drink and then leave after 6 months. Did
we make money on them though? Did we make money on them?
Paul, when's the last time we made a loss on a player? Let's be honest. The transfer dealings, our negotiations are very, very good. Even though they drag themselves out throughout the summer, they are pretty good. But we are still not quite at the level of a modern football club. We don't have a sporting director. We don't have any sort of in-house scouting team. We've got an analysis team that's led up by a young lad who Brendan Rodgers saw his website the first time he was here and introduced him to the club, brought him down to Leicester and he's brought him back up. I think he's only maybe 22, 23 now. He was 16, 17 at the time. We can invest a lot in that, and that will not just help us now. That will help us in the future, because Brendan Rodgers is not always going to be the manager of Celtic. That's just the way the world works. But if you've got that structure in behind, then whilst it takes the time to bring a new manager in, you can continue to scout the market. You can see the players that are out there. You can bring the young players through. If we are to continue to be successful, we need to do two things. We need to make sure that the structure behind the scenes is at the highest level it can be for what we can do, and also that we continue to do the player development model, because these players that took us to that great performance on Tuesday night, we're not going to see them for long. We'll maybe see them at most 2-3 more seasons, and then it's about who comes in after it. And we were saying on Friday, Paul, Callum McGregor, he's now 31. I think he turns 32 this year. We still haven't seen that player that's going to come through and be Callum McGregor's replacement. And that should be one of the things that they work on, because when McGregor hits 33, 34, he's not going to put in the performances that he's put in over the last 2 or 3 seasons. And we want to be in that position that if we get to the knockout ties in the Champions League, we don't want to be, as JP says, a Europa League team. We want to stay at that level, So we need to make sure that the belt's continuously moving and we keep going and we don't just stagnate from where we are just now.
Is it a leather belt, though? That's the big question.
The Gucci belt, from what I've heard.
The Gucci belt. Listen, we're going to be speaking about some of the individual performances before looking ahead to the weekend as well in the domestic action. Some great comments coming through. We've got Rio Rodgers on the X. He's one of our own. Don't know if he's talking about Brendan Rodgers or Colin Watt. Still super proud of Celtic. James Devine. Yeah, that word pride and proud. I've heard that so many times when explaining or describing the other night. Franny Weldon. Colin is like Acsom's return of KT signing. Great to see you back, pal. You're
that means I'll probably be injured in about 3 weeks' time.
Just didn't get struck by lightning. Half man, half pie. One of the best names on here. Did you know there is a Georgios Samaras CSC? Where is it based? Is it in Heraclion? I remember I went there. That's his birthplace.
Mm-hmm.
And so every single place I went to, be that a bar or a restaurant or I jumped in a taxi, I was asking about Samaras. And this taxi driver goes, yeah, he's dead talented, but lazy. He only turns up for the big games. I was like, aye, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. He was talking about his international career. David Brown. Afternoon, guys. I'm through your neck of the woods, Paul. Yes, he's in the sticks as well, Colin. I walk around the Villa Forest whilst listening to my favourite podcast, Life is Good. The Villa Forest, what a beautiful place that is, by the way. And Ian Roy comes in as well to say, I like to ease. You could buy a beer inside the Alliance Arena. Isn't it interesting when you get investment, fresh investment from elsewhere? And I think I've heard it from Aberdeen and Hibs over the last 12 months where they're talking about, why can't you get a beer in the Scottish Football Stadium? You know, so we've got more and more kind of clubs pushing for that to change as well. And we've also got, I'm really stroking your ego now, Colin. Brilliant having Colin back on the channel. Niall the Punk. Kevin Graham. Afternoon, comrades. Old school today. It absolutely is old school. But then, in reference to Dermot Desmond, he says he's not there on a winter Wednesday night against Dundee United, though, the Glory Hunter. Come on, give him a break. Give him a break. You mentioned Callum McGregor. I want to talk about him, JP, because just a week prior to the game, having watched us, I think, put in a brilliant performance at home, people were really criticising Callum McGregor on his performance. And then he goes over to Germany and he produces, for me, an outstanding captain's performance. He was emotional after the game. What is it with Callum? People have seemed really quick to criticise him. He's on a short leash. Is that what we do because he's a guy that's come through the ranks? I know we've done that in the past with players, but he seems to be criticised for any game that's just slightly below par. And you can't just look at it and say he wasn't at his best tonight. He's finished. His legs are gone. He's not at the European level. This is the kind of thing I was hearing. And then he goes out on Tuesday night, and I thought he played a blinder.
I think there's probably an element within the fan base that maybe look at Callum McGregor in the same way as they look at Greg Taylor and be like, well, we could do better. I mean, that is a wild concept to me because I would not want anybody, a fit and firing Callum McGregor is the first name in the team sheet. He's the captain. He's been there through a lot of managerial change in the last 10 years or so and a lot of change in football, but he's been the constant, and it's a great thread to sew back to the start of his time at Celtic when you see that picture of him in what looks like a triple XL football top when he's holding off a guy in the under 12s or whatever division it was. But I just think maybe people obviously have different opinions, and that's fine. But to say that a player is done, I was talking to the guy next to me at the home game with Bayern Munich, and we were talking about that and just sort of saying, how many times did Scott Brown get written off? I mean, he had more comebacks than Sinatra. He was on the rubbish pile in a summer, and then he has this absolute renaissance under Brendan Rodgers and arguably becomes the Scott Brown. Obviously, there's the Scott Brown that celebrates against El Hadj Diouf, which is the iconic sight. But the more iconic sight is of Scott Brown absolutely dominating Scottish football and winning consecutive trebles and all the rest of it. So, and obviously winding up the right people at the right time. Callum McGregor's a different player. He doesn't necessarily have to do that. He just does his talking on the football pitch and does his talking to his fellow midfielders and defenders and keeps everybody in check. And I'm pretty sure that if you asked everybody around about that Celtic team, would they want to play with or without Callum McGregor, they would, every single one of them would say with, because he's helping Engels develop his game. He's helping Hatate develop his game. I mean, the amount of running Hatate had to do the other night, and Alan Shearer commented on it, and then when he said it, I started to sort of almost player cam or view cam, whatever it was called, on Hatate and just watch him. And that was unbelievable. I mean, he must have been absolutely shattered by the end of that game. We're talking about when he's gone down before and laid sprawled out. No wonder he was emotional when he's put everything into the game. But I'd rather be comforted by my manager in an emotional state after being knocked out in the final seconds of a Champions League playoff tie than in a League Cup final. So,
you know, I've said this before, right? And I'm not comparing them in terms of style, but remember Petrov did that. It's like you chucked a bucket of water over him. He was dripping in sweat after every single game. He gave 100%, left nothing at all in the dressing room. Hatate's turned into that type of player. That's not the first time you've seen him done by the end of the game, lying on the deck, absolutely not got another ounce to give. And I don't think we seen that in Rio Hatate under Ange. I think Rio, I'm not going to say he was a luxury player, but he was far more of a baller than that kind of work ethic that I think has been introduced under Brendan Rodgers. There's been so many players who have improved under Brendan, Colin. I mean, you can point to Dyson Maeda. Last season, you could even say Matt O'Reilly. You look at right back, Alistair Johnson now. Some of that progression would have happened naturally in any case, but these guys, for me, are looking better under Brendan Rodgers than they did under the previous gaffer, Colin. And again, not a slight on Ange. I loved Ange and what he did and his style. But I think you do have to give Brendan Rodgers credit here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes back to the point I was making on Friday. If you look at the minutes that both of those players are putting in this season, they're the top two outfield players in terms of minutes. And going on what the average minutes that Callum McGregor's putting in this season per game, by the time the season's finished, he'll have played 7 or 8 more games in terms of minutes than what he has done the season before. And as you get older, that's going to take a wear on your body. So his performances might not hit that level. But if we can rotate him in and out and keep him fresh, he can still get to the very peak of his game. Hatate's slightly different because he went through some terrible injuries last season. So if you were to compare the minutes he's had this year to last year, it's not fair. It's comparing apples and oranges. But Hatate has brought his game on. And I think if you look at Matt O'Reilly last season and the development that he had under Brendan Rodgers, Hatate's went through a similar change. He's maybe not got the same amount of goals as what O'Reilly brought to the team last season, but you can see he's taken that step towards the next level under Brendan Rodgers. And it'll be interesting to see what happens, because I think if he stays one more year, he could get an even better move. But if he's determined to go in the summer, which we don't know, we don't really know what the thing is, but if he goes this summer, I still think there would be that bit of untapped potential in Rio Hatate, because you're seeing the movement, but his killer pass, his ability to ping one in from the edge of the box, to actually be in the edge of the box for those cutbacks, which you will see a lot of next season when Kieran Tierney's the overlapping fullback. I think one more season at Celtic would do Rio Hatate the world of good. And if someone could get in his ear and say that to him, he would develop even better as a player. I know he was late into professional football because he went through the college and the university system in Japan. So he's still got years in him. And I think just one more year of development would get him and take him to that next level.
You hope that these players are receptive to that. You know, from Brendan, it was quite clear that something between Brendan and Kyogo didn't allow that to happen, Colin, didn't allow Kyogo to be part of what we're building here. But you do hope that Rio, because I think Rio's probably proven Brendan Rodgers wrong in many ways, JP, because if you look at the early games under Brendan, he wasn't playing. Rio wasn't playing. David Turnbull was playing before him. And then when you went into the Champions League, yes, there was an injury, but Bernardo was getting game time ahead of him as well. And now he's, if I name my best 11, and I know that changes depending on what game you're playing, but if I was just to pick my strongest 11, Hatate's in it. Hatate is in it. And the other night there, when I was watching the game back the morning after, yeah, there's 4 or 5 times he loses the ball. But that's because he's trying to do what Colin mentioned. He's trying to play the killer pass. And there's a level of risk. There's an element of risk with that type of pass. But when it comes off, you invariably you can score a goal. So I think that Rio, if Rio Hatate was to leave, I do think it would be a wee bit premature if he was to leave in the summer. JP, what's your thoughts? Do you think he's coming to that end of his cycle?
I think that, and based on no knowledge at all, but just from hearing Colin talking about how Hatate's game's developed and how it's developing, I don't think this version of Rio Hatate is the final version that you'll see of his career, and this is him hit his heights and that's it. But I just think that maybe Brendan Rodgers has put his arm around them and said, look, he's probably had those conversations with every single player and been like, right, where do you see yourself? Like, what's your ambitions here? Like, do you this is just a stepping stone, fine. What's your goal? Like, where do you want to get to? I'll help you get there. Right? We'll work on this together. And I think that's what he's done with Hatate and been like, look, if you want to get that move and you want to play at a higher level, then you need to do X, Y, and Z to your game and put everything you've got into it. And despite my kind of frustrations with Hatate, I can see that he's at least putting the effort in to try and do that. And if it is to get a move, then that's going to benefit Celtic and him, because we'll get a good fee for him, far more than what we paid. We might not get what people were saying we were going to get. I remember after that go at Tynecastle, it was like, oh, he's our next 20, 25 million pound player. There's no way he's that. He's not done anything Matt O'Reilly style to have that sort of label put, or that sort of fee put next to his name. But I'd say he's done enough to certainly suggest that he's somewhere between 10, 15 million.
He's an eight figure.
Yeah.
If Steven Gerrard's tuning in, that's 10 million and above, mate. But he's an 8-figure player, isn't he?
That's the thing as well. I don't think the move for him is the Premier League. I don't think that suits his style of football. I think if he was to move abroad, it would be somewhere that would be more beneficial to him. Would be either Serie A or La Liga, where he's got that time on the ball and he can find that pass. I think if he went down south, it would be the wrong move for him, because the teams that would be interested in him, I think they would just bypass him completely. I mean, Brighton might be a decent move. Mitoma's done well down there, although he's more of a winger. The fact that Hatate sort of drifts out there might sort of play into that, but you've got to find the right team. Whereas I think if he was to move to Italy or Spain, there'd be plenty of teams that would enjoy having someone like that can play that pass and get the strikers in.
Yeah. Listen, I'm not lining up Celtic players to leave the football club. I don't like Celtic losing quality, but history will tell us, you know, in recent history will tell us, if you look at Jota, Matt O'Reilly, Kyogo, we do tend to lose a player, you know, once a season. And to be fair, if there was a player to go in terms of a player that I think is replaceable, Hatate is also in that bracket, because as you say, JP, I remember the furore after the Tynecastle game, and you were the guy that was like, curb your enthusiasm here. You know, he's not quite there yet. And I do think the relationship between him and Brendan Rodgers has probably developed in the last couple of years, whereas the Kyogo and Brendan Rodgers, again, from the outside looking in, JP, like you say, we don't know for sure. It didn't seem to develop in the same way, even though Brendan did play him. He missed a sitter. Talking about Callum McGregor, Patrick, you know what? It was one of the ones that Callum McGregor this season has, I think, enough credit in the bank with his goals, and particularly from a bit of distance. He's got enough credit in the bank that he could take that shot on. Yeah, it was off target, but it was unusual for him this season, because he's been pretty much on point from similar distances. And you know what? I think he earned the right to take that shot, because it was him that won the ball as well. So if he scores a goal, Patrick, you know, he's a hero. Calmac, here's one for you guys. Mo Sislak says Calmac is our best captain since Paul McStay. That's a bold statement, right? So have a think of that. Let me know if you agree or disagree, and also let us know in the comments. We've got 1,600 strong, and I just keep getting things like this coming through. Danny McGrain, great to see Colin back.
Misspelled.
I know. Have you been contacting your pals to comment on this, Colin?
But at 1,600, what more do you want?
Aye, that's true. David Harvey. the flash of lightning, David talks about the flash of lightning that we've seen on your screen earlier on, is merely made about going out for a jog. Right? and here's an interesting one as well. I keep saying that, because I went to my first game in 1987, I have now seen Celtic in 5 decades, which makes me feel a lot older than I actually am. But I've seen Celtic playing football in 5 different decades, which is insane. Pete McGee has been watching Celtic for 70 years. And out with the Lions, that was right up there as one of our best ever performances in Europe for me. See, when somebody who's actually watched it for that long, JP, says that really strikes a chord with me, because my Celtic European kind of career has had ups and downs. Back in the 80s and right up until Martin O'Neill's time, we were nowhere near it. We were lucky to get through the second round in Europe. And then Martin O'Neill changed all that. And then the expectation level came back and the standards started coming back. And it was like, we can progress in Europe. It takes us to our 3rd European final, 2003. We have the brilliant back-to-back last 16s under Strachan. We've got a last 16 under Lennon. We've got the memories against Lazio and Barca. But in terms of campaigns, no many campaigns in my 46 years on the God's green earth have I enjoyed Celtic in Europe. It's normally been a disappointment. So to hear somebody like Pete McGee saying that, 70 years watching Celtic, and it's up there, that really does, for me, that carries quite a bit of weight.
Well, I mean, Brendan Rodgers mentioned it in his post-match when he said, "I've just been speaking to Neil Lennon and Martin O'Neill, and they're 2 people who know a good Celtic performance away in Europe, and both of them were, they were not feigning it in any way. There was no need to feign it. There was genuine, like when Neil Lennon sort of shook his hand and put his arm around him and went, 'Unbelievable, mate! Like, unbelievable! Like, what a job you've done with this team and getting to this point tonight.' And Martin O'Neill the same. So he pointed out that in their case, they've obviously been around Celtic for 25 years, not 70 like Pete, but long enough to be able to call it and not be like sycophantic or patronising or anything like that. There was none of that. It was genuine praise. I think anybody that watched that game would surely not be able to. I mean, even the most bitter of Rangers fans, despite what they might put out on social media, if you were to actually sit them down Clockwork Orange style and make them watch that 90 minutes, then give them a lie detector test afterwards and say, "Do you think Celtic played well in that game?" If they were to say no, the thing would ping off the charts because they would be lying.
They would say no.
Oh, they would say no, but it would ping to say you're lying. Because it's just amusing to watch how they cling on to so little petty things. But fair enough.
By the way, before we get back into some of the comments and looking ahead to the weekend, JP, right? I've just got to say it because I know you love your jerseys, you love your kits. That Bayern Munich strip, by the way, unbelievable!
It's an absolute popper.
It was class, right? And the amount of times Jerry McCulloch on the Celtic TV commentary said, "Oh, the men in beige," and beige is normally a descriptive term for something that's a bit boring, conservative. But what a jersey! And the goalkeeper jersey. I mean, I'm looking at that thing. That's a Celtic top. Adidas, give us the trefoil. Give us the 3 stripes down the sleeves and give us all the works, because
it kind of looked like a late 80s or early 90s Ireland top as well, didn't it?
Yeah.
The colourway.
It did. Colin, can you tell us anything about what's in store Celtic jersey wise?
The what you're looking for, I wouldn't be surprised if you don't see something next season.
Really? Oh, there we go. And what about normally the 4th kit that's never actually worn by the team comes out March term? Has it been decided? Have you got any?
I've not heard anything on that.
I would hope they've decided to wrap that idea, because I'm not on board with that. I think
it's quite interesting though, because the Adidas contract's supposedly up this summer, but everybody's aware that Celtic have re-signed. They've just not announced it yet. Mm-hmm. And the deal will see Celtic move into one of the top 2 tiers of Adidas teams. So things like the trefoil, you'll see things like that next season. The investment that Adidas are making in Celtic just now is really, really high. And it shows when you look at the sales, even those interim results last week or the week before, whenever it was, the revenue for merchandising and things just continues to grow year on year. That third kit, you'll struggle to find that in a Celtic shop just now. And that just shows
especially
you,
after the result the other night.
Yeah, it just shows you. I know a lot of people complain about the price of the kits. It is sort of a supply and demand thing. If Celtic get away with selling so many kits at £70, why would they reduce them? What you're getting right now is gone are the days where you used to be able to get in at the end of the season and pick up a kit for like 10, 20 quid. When Celtic are selling them out, it's just not happening anymore.
It's incredible that it continues to rise, even though there are numerous online sources that will sell you a fake. And a lot of people are buying them, guys, right? It's just a fact. And you're looking at that going up, and that will continue to go up with the added exposure to Champions League football. Now, Jungle Lion, welcome to the show. Celtic have their best performance in years, and the nonsense begins with this SF shenanigans, relentless. Well, that's what happens. They'll come up with something, some kind of story to try and take the focus away from Celtic, won't they? Joe Hamilton, afternoon troops. Brendan extends his contract and keeps building a strong squad. That's how we can progress. Yeah, we are analysing everything that comes out of his mouth, JP. Absolutely everything. So you just never know what the future holds. But it feels as though we're building something. And personally, I think he's at the very heart of that. And he's probably a very demanding manager. I look at the demands of certain managers and I think, right, Martin O'Neill versus the board, Martin O'Neill would have been a very demanding gaffer. And you've seen near the end of his tenure, he wasn't able to spend the kind of money that he had in the early parts of his time at Celtic. I think that you then look at managers like Tony Mowbray, Ronnie Deila and Neil Lennon, who very much, I think, would be influenced by the board rather than the other way about. I'm not going to say there were soft touches, but I do think that the control was in the hands of the board back then when it came to pushing for signings. And then you move into the Ange Postecoglou, Brendan Rodgers territory. And I'd put them back on the kind of Martin O'Neill level where it's like they're going to be demanding constantly. And I guess it comes down to ambition. When it gets to the point where the board at the moment, if they're backing a manager, which they are, that's great. And hopefully they continue to do it. But then I just get the impression that Brendan will want to keep pushing that envelope and keep pushing it. And it's all about whether or not the board match that ambition. Barry O'Sullivan, afternoon troops, my work trying to get in the way of Acsom got Keir in the end. I'm glad you did, Barry. And Northern Culture says, never let work get in the way of Acsom. There we go. One other thing, Ian Roy brings it up here. Ian Roy, I think, is watching us in Florida. He says, how about a Celtic Supporters Club convention in Europe, just like they do in the upcoming one in Vegas in June? I've often wondered that. Like, you know how you get a convention, a Comic Con and all that, and it goes all over the world, JP. It's just the Vegas convention. I mean, you could have one in Glasgow. You could have a Celtic convention in Glasgow. You could have one in Spain. You could go somewhere in Europe and have a convention and get the supporters clubs
build it around a game like the St. Roch's Celtic Legends game. I know do a game like that and rent out a cool stadium. I'm not suggesting we rent out the San Siro or anything like that, but maybe something a bit more modest in its capacity. But I think it's a great idea. It definitely would get attended, especially if it was in April or May or June or something like that, like in the months where we're not, let's be honest, likely to be in Europe in competition. So an away trip for some folk would definitely be up their street to get to experience a different city without maybe the exorbitant cost of, because absolutely the hotels and everything else go up so much, flights and that go up so much that's why I didn't even look at Munich. I was just like, there's no way. I mean, that's going to be
a bridge too far.
£500 to £1,000, which I just don't have at the moment. So I consoled myself with the fact that I'd been to the Alliance Arena already in 2017. So I was like, right, it's not as if it's a stadium that I'm not going to maybe get another chance to go to because I've been to it. So I said the other day, if it was a toss-up between Birmingham and Munich, I would have gone to Birmingham. And I know that sounds absolutely insane, but I was so glad to get to go to that game because it was it was just special because it genuinely could be the only time we play Aston Villa in European competition in my life.
Yeah. See, to be fair on that, Paul, the idea of a European convention. If you go to Santa Ponza anytime over the summer period, you'll probably find there's a Celtic convention going on over there. But that's crazy, the amount of Celtic pubs you'll find there. But was it before COVID, just after COVID, we hired out the SECC and they had like the Celtic Festival?
That's right. Yeah, they did,
And that was like a weekend event. And from, if memory serves me correct, that was sold out the whole time.
Yeah.
Like, it was a struggle to get tickets to go to that. So it just shows you the level, though. I mean, the fact that fans will travel from Glasgow, from Ireland, from wherever, over to Vegas. And I know it's been in Vegas, it's been in New York, it's been in Toronto, maybe, somewhere else. I think it's been in Florida. It goes all over in North America. But it shows you the strength of the Celtic support worldwide. A lot of people will say, well, Man City, Barcelona, Real Madrid, they're all bigger clubs. When do you ever go to random cities in Europe and find a Real Madrid supporters club? No matter where you go in Europe, you're never more than 10, 20 miles from a Celtic supporters club. And that just shows you how far and how wide and how big of a club Celtic really are.
Oh, without a doubt. Pete McGee also says this, guys, that every player was a 10 out of 10 from you on Tuesday. I mean, I said yesterday, Pete, that, the only haggle would be whether or not a player got a 9 or a 10, but, there was nobody underneath that. I'm going to link this in seamlessly, JP, and I remember being at Murrayfield back in 2000, I think it was. Oasis were headlining, and a band called Doves, who I was and am a big fan of, came on the stage, and Jimmy Goodwin, the lead singer, not the manager of Dundee United, pointed out an Ireland flag and said, "Where's that Celtic banner? Get that Celtic banner back up." And from that moment, I loved them even more. And I've noticed that their debut album, Lost Souls, is behind you. Is there a reason for that?
They're playing in Glasgow on Tuesday. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, it's also the same night we're playing Aberdeen. Yep. So football wins over music that night for me. But they're playing the SWGC without the non-Dundee United managing Jimmy Goodwin. Unfortunately, he's not in the best of fettle to go out on the road, but has recorded the new record with them, and the Williams brothers from the band are going to front the show at SWG3 on Tuesday. So if you're not going to the game and you do like Doves, then I would recommend
it. One of my favourite bands. Absolutely. There used to be Sub. Remember the song Ain't No Love, Ain't No Use?
Yeah.
Completely different vibe, but what a band. Give McCowan, says Johnny Ryan, give McCowan the games and you'll see Calmac's success. And I'm going to throw this one to you, Colin. You know a lot about Luke McCowan. You've watched his progress. You went to school. I think you were a couple of years older than him, same school as him. Do you agree with that from Johnny?
No. I mean, McCowan's a good player, a really good player, a great addition to the Celtic squad. But he's also, he's like 27, maybe 26, 27 now. So he's going to be hitting his peak in the next 2 or 3 years. He's not someone I would say is a long-term successor for McGregor. I also think McCowan's much better further forward in the park. I don't think he's someone who can sit deep and sort of dictate the play that way. I think Engels can do that just now. As much as I like Engels going further forward, I think he's one that could sit in the sort of 6 role. But McCowan, considering he was a winger, him then dropping into defensive mid, I don't think it would be the time. He would need another couple of years to learn and grow in that position. By that point, you're at the stage where you're going, right, well, who's Luke McCowan's replacement? So a good addition to the squad, and I think it's those kind of signings that we need to make sure that we rotate and keep our players at the peak of their fitness. And I think you saw he played pretty well at the weekend when he got the start. So Luke McCowan, great player, great to be part of the squad. I thought he could have maybe come on Tuesday.
I was just about to ask you that.
A bit of something, yeah. I think
he saving him for extra time, maybe?
Could have been, but it's good to see Luke doing well. Good Greenock boy doing well. Nothing better than that.
Good Greenock boy.
Oh, that will please Sean Balfe behind me. You said that because nobody for Greenock can do any wrong. It's quite funny. He's Greenock.
I just can't believe Colin was talking about all the greats from Greenock last week and he never mentioned Stevie Baggio, who, by the way, What a talent he was when he broke on.
I went to school. I was in the same year as his nephew. So Aidan played for. Well, he was at Celtic Youth and then played for Morton for a while. I think he got maybe 50 appearances for Morton. But then Stevie's boys is Jay and I can't remember Jay's brother, but they both were at Swansea, and I think Jay's still playing down there at the moment.
Yeah, it runs in the family. And Stevie's dad was Norrie, I think, Fulton, who was a really good junior player. Gordon Coney, from heroic displays by a team that pays their taxes to a fairy tale story by a tabloid that's got as much credibility as Sir Craig White, tell me it isn't season ticket renewal time at Snake Mountain. Well done, Gordon, for getting the venue right. Snake Mountain, it absolutely is. Kevin Mullen comes in to say, afternoon Acsom, as the other night shows, Kuhn, Dyson, Jota is frightening front three. If we can add another 3 top players on top, we have the now, we will have more success next season. This is what it's about, JP, right? So you look at that squad, and when I was talking about it yesterday, I said, right, you've got a starting 11 you can rely on. You've got a starting, you've even got a few wee options like the front three. And you're looking at that starting 11 and thinking, that's strong, right? But on the bench, Colin said about Luke McCowan, I actually think we were saving him for the extra time because we didn't have much options. We didn't have that depth. Bayern Munich were going to beat us in extra time because they did have the depth. And that is the reality of it. It was a sucker punch to lose that goal. But the way the game was going and with the strength of their substitutions near the end of the game, you know, I do think that they would have been too strong as a squad for us on the night. And I think that going into the summer transfer window, that is something that we do need to do. 3's a figure I've got in my head. But 3 players beyond Kieran Tierney and Jeffrey Schlupp, I think. So you're actually bringing 5 in, you know, and there is that chance that you might lose one, and that one might be a starter. It might be somebody like Rio Atati. Will the Celtic board do it? Because they've done it last summer. Will they do that? Will they back Brendan to that level?
I've got no doubt they will. I just don't see how we go from having that summer window to having a difficult January window, although we did get Jota in for whatever it was, 7-8 million. And I'm pretty sure if the deal was there to be done with Brøndby for Kvistgaard, and I mean they've come out and said we had no intention to sell that player in the summer, in January. So if a club's saying that, then you know that they're obviously being like, if you want him now, then you're going to need to pay well over the odds. And Celtic have obviously weighed that up and been like, right, we're not going to smash our transfer record by 3, 4, 5 million on this guy when his actual value is X. So we'll wait and we'll get him in the summer. If the fact he didn't move at all, therefore, I've said before, we surely are there or thereabouts in the queue to speak to Kvistgaard about moving to Celtic. But I just don't see how we go from that last summer to, okay, not an ideal January window to then a terrible summer window again. I just don't. That doesn't make sense to me. And I know people will be like, "Well, look at the past, you know, all the rest of it." There's so much history to suggest you're being naive and a happy clapper or whatever. But I just don't see it, and I just don't see the body language from Brendan Rodgers suggesting that that's going to be different either. Because he was very quick to point out in a presser, "Well, look what we did in the summer." He's like, "You're trying to lead me down a path to be anti-Celtic board and cause divisions and everything else." He's too smart to fall into that. Mm-hmm. And he went, "Well, what about the summer when we spent 11 million in Ingles and 9 million in Ida and 6 million in Trusty?" And there was another signing, Luke McCowan as well. And I know that's not a big money signing, but he's become an important member of the squad who Rodgers plays and uses. So no, I do. I see us breaking the transfer record, as in the Scottish transfer record in summer. I think that'll happen.
See that? Sorry, on that, what you're saying, JP, about the Kvistgaard, I really don't understand that at all. Because Brøndby's season starts now. It starts next month. So they're halfway through their season when the summer transfer window comes round. So I don't understand why a team like that would be like, wait till the summer and sign him halfway through a season. I mean, obviously, only teams like Celtic sell their best player halfway through a season. But it doesn't make any sense why his price would come down at that point, because if he's had a stormer in his first half of the season, you can only think that his price is going to go up. So I don't understand that. I thought January would have been the best time to sign him. That one kind of confuses me a bit.
Had we signed him, we'd have broken our own personal transfer record 3 times in one campaign, which is just incredible. So Brendan Rodgers
It's
is
about
right.
time. Let's face facts. It's about time.
It is, and he's right to point it out, JP, the fact that he's had the backing. But I agree with you. I think we will do it again this summer, and not just for the sake of doing it.
No.
I think we'll do it because it's the only way for us to progress. Now, Ross Evans is supporting the channel, so thanks for doing that, Ross. Everyone has access to watching Celtic TV now. So there's little argument in it affecting attendances. The league needs to do better with revenue generation from fans TV. I agree with you. I think that we've seen something with Amazon Prime whereby there could be a pre-existing platform online that just gets the deal. You subscribe to it and you can watch it because it's not going to affect game-going fans. JP will still go to the game. You know, if it was announced tomorrow that Prime have got a deal with Scottish Football or Celtic, all the games are going to get viewed. Do you know a single supporter will be like, all right, I'm not going to renew my season ticket then. I'll just sit at home and watch the games on my laptop, on my smart TV. That doesn't happen. It doesn't.
I think that Greenock Storm's just arrived in Glasgow. So
you're welcome to
in the weather.
You need to get out to the sticks, guys. The sun is splitting the trees out there.
The only sound that'll interrupt your broadcast is an ice cream van, Paul. Let's face it. Which I do miss. Actually.
And by the way, I'll be out there if there is an ice cream van. Absolutely. Listen,
you just touching on that, Paul. Though, like you're saying, if anybody was to give up their book, the waiting list at Celtic's got at the minute as well, it would be filled. Mm-hmm. So I think it's the best thing for the league in general. If the TV deal doesn't improve with Sky, the fact that they're able to sell the pay-per-views, it should be all on the one platform, like an Amazon Prime where we can subscribe to that.
It was funny. Oh, look at that. Beer clouds. I like how you call it beer clouds, rolling in here in Florida. When we did This Is Acsom the other week, David Lowe was on it, and we were talking about the reconstruction of the main stand to increase the capacity, Colin, something we've been banging on about on here for 8 years. And he was like, it really needs an upgrade. I mean, you've got executive boxes in there that have got dado rails, and he pinpointed the dado rails. And so, sorry for anyone who still has a dado rail with maybe one colour at the top and then a patterned wallpaper underneath. If you do, there was no offence intended. But yes, David showed me his box a few days after that, and the dado rail does exist. So it's time Celtic updated the main stand. Listen, it's been an absolute old school catch up here. We've had 60, in fact, over 1,700 watching live. Give us a thumbs up on the YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. We're only about 20 away from 32,000 subscribers. And we've also got a gig 1 week tonight with Johan Mjällby, someone who played in a European final for Celtic, and not many people can say that. And he's with us in Glasgow at Gracie's. The tickets are £15. The ticket link is underneath the video. Thanks everybody for watching.
Sorry, I just want to say one more thing. It's just tomorrow, for anyone that's a Greenock local, it will be a sad day. We're saying farewell to someone that was a big Celtic fan down here in Greenock, was in my class all the way through school. So we're saying goodbye to Christopher McVeigh tomorrow, and I just want to say to his family and that I hope you're all doing well. There is a fundraiser for a local charity that we are supporting on my Twitter. If anyone could go on and make a donation in Chris's memory. I know a lot of people that are from Greenock that are watching will know who he was, and it's a very sad loss. So it's going to be a difficult day tomorrow, but prayers to his family, and we'll all get through it.
Thoughts and prayers to everyone and who knew him in such a young age as well, Colin. Thank you once again for joining us on A Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers, Paul.